What's up, guys? We're back with a McFarlane Toys Spawn review, taking a look at probably my most anticipated figure from this first push of figures that Todd is doing, and I'm hopeful that these are going to be as exciting as I think they are. I've got varying levels of success with this stuff so far, but we're going to see. So we're taking a look at the Gunslinger Spawn, which I think this is probably one of the more, anticipated figures in general for folks out there. Obviously, Clown and Violator from this wave are their own thing because they're so big and different, but as far as the Spawn figures go, this guy's got to be up there, right? He's a pretty cool design. He comes in a kind of boring box, honestly. I'm not a big fan of these boxes, and on this one in particular, it's got this weird 90s era call out of being from a record-breaking comic, and if you saw my Kickstarter Spawn review, I did not care for all of the sort of puffing of the chest kind of stuff that was done on that figure from this is the biggest thing ever, and I don't really care for this here either. Something about this really bugs me. Your mileage may vary, obviously. The box, though, was really big, and there seems like there's a lot of unused space in this, and it's kind of plain. I'm not trying to harp on this box unnecessarily, but something about it is oddly generic to me. So he's there in the big window. You've got that sort of sticker call-out thing. You got your Spawn logo down there on the bottom. One side panel has some cool artwork of Spawn, and then the other side panel has a small product shot, and then the back, unfortunately, has no cross-sell. I really hoped that it would have cross-sell, but it doesn't. It's just got this massive shot of the figure, which, for what it's worth, is a pretty good shot and really gives you a lot of insight into what this guy looks like. So let's do it. Let's pull him out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, Gunslinger Spawn. This is an interesting figure. It is more in line with kind of what I expected it to be. It's very similar to say, that Mortal Kombat Spawn. It's certainly not the same thing as the Kickstarter Spawn, but it is a pretty cool figure. It's definitely something that I think is going to kind of suck me into getting the Spawn stuff. And I've had kind of an up and down history with McFarlane lately, as they've sort of come back. I like the Spawn stuff to a degree. I obviously have my issues with the Kickstarter Spawn. I got rid of almost all my DC stuff, though, and I don't buy really anything else he makes because I don't think it looks very good. But this thing is pretty cool, but it is one of those figures that, for me anyway, it's going to be something that it looks a lot better than I can really do things with. It has some limitations in the articulation department, but it is very easily posed in terms of like vanilla stances, and it looks really good, so it's kind of one of those double-edged swords. I don't really mind it too much. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around, all that good stuff. You've got a head that can look up. It's just a double ball peg. It is kind of a weird ball peg, though, so it goes super, super high up into the head. And then it's a fat ball at the neck. Goes down really good. You've got tilt side to side, full rotation. Arms go out at the shoulders. They rotate. There is a little shimmy, but it's not really a butterfly joint. There is a bicep swivel at this band, which is hidden really well. Double jointed elbows, so super good range there. And then you've got rotation, and you've got hinges at those wrists, and of course it's like a ball hinge, so pop it out and you can see the ball in there with your hinge action. So just rotate it in whichever direction you need. It is kind of locked in there by these gauntlets, but you can just pop the hand off and move it around, and I find that to be a lot easier. At the torso, you do have your like diaphragm cut, so he goes side to side a little bit. You can shimmy back and forth, and then you've got rotation. It's not much in the way of crunch, but the actual waist itself can move forward to get you about that far hunched over, and then he lurches back a little bit, and it also helps with your tilt quite a bit as well. There is a rotation down there, but it's kind of tight. I would say you only kind of half use it, maybe not used for full rotation. The legs is where he's going to be locked down, so he's got the sort of like bandoliers down on his hips there, so they kind of get in the way, but not too bad. So you can go out about this far. Forward, though, you can really only do about that. He's got kind of the diaper thing, so if you do too far, you're going to really start to jack this up. And then, of course, there is no thigh cut on this figure, which is unfortunate because at the very least, there is a cut at this belt right here. So there could have been one, which, one is not really that useful, but I wish there was at least something here, because this is where I find myself having trouble posing him at times. I know it's not the most important cut, but it's the thing that's always missing. We've got double jointed knees, and they go all the way back. Pretty good. I mean, he does have a lot of stuff going on, so they go all the way back still. The jacket is going to get in the way a little bit, though. And then you've got your rotation down at those ankles, because they are the same kind of like ball hinges that we see at the wrists, so back and forth. Of course, the boot is going to get in the way, but it still moves a little bit. And then you do have rocker. And then you've got your toe hinges, which take them or leave them. I don't really care about them. I think they're kind of ugly. But otherwise, he's very much par for the course when it comes to the spawns we've seen at retail. He is still very different from the Kickstarter spawn, but I think he moves pretty well. Again, he's maybe not going to be the most dynamic figure out there because he does have some hip limitations, but otherwise, not too bad. Now, that said, I've kind of already mentioned what my main draw is for this figure, and it's the looks. Because I do think he is kind of limited in some ways in terms of moving him around, but when you get him in a nice just sort of stance, he looks good, and I can be happy with him on a shelf or wherever he's going to end up in my home. And I think he looks really good. I'm really happy with the overall presentation on this guy. I'm very much interested to see who's going to make a fully, like, soft goods wired coat for this guy first, because while this coat is actually pretty nice, it does of course get in the way. It gets in the way of some articulation, and it is a static pose. The posing is pretty dynamic though. I mean, you've got the frills coming off the back, you've of course got the Telltale Spawn collar, and it is of course going in one direction. So ideally, you know, your head's probably always going to be looking to his left, your right. Otherwise, unless you want to obscure him or do something a little bit more brooding like that. But I think he looks pretty good. Proportions on him are nice. He's obviously going to be a 7-inch scale style figure, but there's a lot going on with this guy. I mean, there is a ton of just stuff all over him. You've got spikes and bands and skulls and spiked gauntlets, and you've got the bandoliers with the bullets for his belt that run all the way around, and these are thankfully painted. They look really good. You've got the holsters for his 6-shooters. You've got more bands. You've got a knife here. Of course, it's sculpted in. It's not really painted all that nicely, but because there's not really any paint on it, but it could have had some detail. It is, however, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of little things all over this figure that help to bring him out. His torso is very classic Spawn in terms of the white stripes that run down the chest. The pants are fully textured, so there is sort of like a denim feel to them. And then you've even got the cowboy boots down here with the spikes all over them, of course. I do think they look a little janky because of how they have to be separated from the calf to the ankle, but it's not too bad. And then you've even got the spurs down there as well. The jacket even has a leather texture to it, so it's not just flat plastic. It is, of course, textured through and through. And I think he looks really good. He's a different take on Spawn, obviously. I mean, it's not an unknown take by any means, but it's certainly, you know, a little bit more out there. It's a gun-slinging Western-style Spawn, cowboy Spawn, and I think it looks pretty cool. I'm actually really happy overall with the presentation on this figure. Colors look really good. Paint is really clean. I don't have any issues with slop or mess or anything like that. The hat is equal parts cool and ridiculous because of how tall it is, but you've got the skull brim up there, and then of course the head sculpt is really well done. There's some shading around those super neon green eyes. The only real downside I have with this particular head sculpt, and it's more of a nitpicky personal thing, is that when it comes to hats, a lot of times the head is obscured in shadow, but it kind of works for Spawn at the same time. So again, it's probably not a big deal either. Otherwise, sculpt and paint on it is pretty fantastic. I'm again really happy with just about everything that's going on here. I'm sure somebody's going to point out some weird thing that I'm not familiar with when it comes to this guy, but I think as far as, you know, face value for someone who's not super into the history or lore of Spawn, I really like this. It's nice, especially for however much this was, $20-some or something like that. I think it's a nice figure, good sculpt, good paint, and overall just a pretty cool design that translates really nicely into figure form too. And then as far as accessories goes, he has, well, kind of what he needs. He's got stuff to sling, basically. So you've got two 6-shooter, you know, sort of guns here, and they are nicely sized. They're big. They fit into the holsters just fine. There is a little bit of paint on them. There's some sculpt, you know, some sort of demonic nonsense that's going on with the actual grip of the gun. I can't really make it out, like some sort of like tortured souls kind of thing, faces or something in there. But they look good, and he can hold them just fine because he does come with 2 trigger finger hands. He doesn't come with any extra hands, which I kind of wish he did. I'd love to just get some style pose or some fists with this guy just to beef him up a little bit. But he does come with 2 guns as far as, you know, your pistols here, which I do really like. And then he comes with the rifle and, of course, the sheath that goes on his back. So this is a separate piece. It's in the box. It's not on the figure. It's just a sheath. You wrap it over the shoulders and the head, and then it sits on him, holds the rifle. No paint on it, but it's got a bunch of buckles and belts and all kinds of 90s era nonsense on it. Take this guy out, and the only real negative I have with this is that it came super, super warped in the package. It's got a little bit of a bend to it, but it actually retained its shape really nicely when I just sort of put it back in place. You've got some like hell flames over here with a skull on the stock, and then of course kind of like a wooden color for it with a lot of silver. Not a ton of paint, really, but it looks like a gun, and it works for me personally, and it sits on his back really well. It doesn't throw him off. It's not super heavy. It's not intrusive. It doesn't get in the way. So he is one of those figures that I very much like. He can store all of his weapons on him at any given time, and he looks good with them in his hands or just on his person. And then, of course, because it wouldn't be a McFarlane figure without it, we do get the stand, which you probably will not need for this guy because he does not have any balance issues that I have noticed. But it's a thing for this line. So you get a Spawn stand if you need one. If you don't need one, it's in the box. Don't be like me and throw it away like I did with that original Mortal Kombat Spawn because I forgot about it. So yeah, Gunslinger Spawn is a pretty solid Spawn figure. He is very much the kind of figure you expect him to be. So if you're big into the McFarlane stuff right now, you're not going to have a problem with this guy whatsoever. But he does have some limitations when it comes to articulation. It's the hips area, nothing else. The waist, the torso is good, the arms are good, the hands, the feet are good, the knees are good. It's the hips. He can't move his legs too far outwards, and then of course he has no thigh cut for rotation there, which does make some posing a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. Otherwise, I think he looks pretty fantastic. And again, like I said, he's going to look really awesome just with his guns at the ready, with that rifle outstretched, with his hand on the brim of his hat. I think he's a pretty solid figure. He looks good in really easy to pose vanilla poses, and otherwise a nice entry in the line. Like if we can get more stuff like this, I'm definitely going to be happy with the direction this line is going. So that's going to do it for this look at the McFarlane Toys Gunslinger Spawn. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.